Hi, thanks so
Hello.
much,
Hello.
Oleg. Yeah, so in this panel, we'll be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, so DEI topics in the context of recruitment. We will be covering three areas of the topic: building a first impression of a company, how the recruitment process could be done better, and also what happens after the recruitment. But yeah, before getting to the topics, let's introduce ourselves. Anna, maybe we'll start with you. Could you please tell about your background a bit and your approach to DEI?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Anna Carolina. I am a project manager for DNI at King. If you don't know King, it's the company that makes Candy Crush. My background is basically in psychology. I'm Brazilian, that's what I studied in Brazil. But I entered the games industry through being a QA. And because I moved around a lot of countries, and so it was hard to get a job as a psychologist. And then QA kind of sort of appeared in my life. I really liked it, did that for 6 years. And when I got the chance to be with DNI and work with people and be closer to people, I jumped at it because it's what I love, actually.
Cool. Thanks so much and welcome. Javiera?
Hi, I'm Javiera. My pronouns are she, her. I used to be a professional chef for 8 years, and then I sort of struggled for a number of years trying to identify my own path into games, and eventually started to meet other producers, and um, finally found language around the thing that I always ended up doing for people and companies, and so I started as an associate producer a year and a half ago at an indie studio named Threshold Games, and we're making a solar punk city builder 4X game.
Sounds cool. Lizzie?
Thank you. I didn't know about the chef history. We have to talk
Yeah,
about that at some stage.
cool.
My name's Lacey Kane. I'm an external producer at Kepler Interactive, and I have been working in the video game industry in Melbourne, Australia. I'm actually in New Zealand at the moment. But when I started, similar to Javier, didn't know I could be in the industry for a long time. So when I actually started in the industry, one of the first things I did was start to run events with some Melbourne, and we ended up forming a company called Girl Geek Academy. And the whole purpose of that company that we started was around encouraging people like myself to experiment and play games, make games, as well as all things tech. And we really started to run events and initiatives that we wanted to see. So we wanted to run game jams that weren't all about pizza and doing 48, 78 hours of work. And ever since then, I've just been really focused on everything around me being surrounded by diverse and inclusive initiatives, because at the end of the day, we're making entertainment, so we should be able to make entertainment for everybody.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. And my name is Sonia. I'm the CEO of Phantom Game Labs. I'm coming from very monoculture backgrounds. So I live and work in Finland, where it's actually quite hard to drive diversity. I've been recruiting experts in IT and games for about 15 years, and I founded Women in Games some maybe 11 years ago. And then the goal was to help women to become leaders and founders in the game industry. But again, yeah, that was just like the first step and maybe the easiest step in a monoculture to drive a bit more diversity. But yeah, that's us. I'm super excited. Let's see how far we go in about 40 minutes. DEI is very topical in the context of recruitment as well. And now we are diving deeper into that and hopefully share some best practices and also food for thought. So the challenge here is that companies tend to set goals around diversity by hiring certain number of women or people of color, for example, but without really building a culture that celebrates people's differences. And we can say the same challenges in emerging in the recruitment as well. So acquiring talent, companies struggle to find talent, and at the same time, talent don't find the companies or get relevant information about the companies to apply. So here's my first question, starting with first impression of a company. So we have a company that's recruiting. How to ensure that we as a company are communicating to well enough to actually reach different types of individuals? What do you think?
I think we know we had a lot of discussions about this when we were prepping, and Javiera, I'd love to hear about your you're talking about spaces that people of color and women of color and underrepresented genders gather to hear about opportunities in the industry. I think that might be a cool place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, in I'd say like around November of last year, we were looking at Threshold. We were looking at really building our hiring platform and strategy, and how we were going to go about creating a pool of diverse candidates. And I think that that's the first step that studios should look at is how can we get diversity in our candidate pool, instead of just saying like a little blurb in the job description of, hey, we won't discriminate against you, which is basically what that statement says. But being, how could we be proactive in that? And so we created a pretty comprehensive list of around 22 special interest group game dev communities. You can think of them as kind of game dev like support groups or incubators. These groups are on Discord and Facebook, or might be on other forums. But we took our job descriptions to those communities directly. And it wasn't just like posting in the group, but posting in the group and then linking to that post in the discussion channel, and identifying myself as like a hiring party, and leaving a Calendly link in those groups to invite any interested parties to chat with me for 10-15 minutes if they had any questions about the role. And part of this was to deconstruct our assumptions of what candidates were perceiving was a studio that was safe for them. And it turned out really incredible. Like, we're a small studio. We haven't published our first game yet. And so looking from the outside in, that's a ton of risk that a person who's looking for a job would be taking on. So it was really important to show up with transparency, but also to allow people space and time to ask us critical questions. And within about a week, I had booked around 26 calls. And when you think about that, it really does place a different burden on a company to make the space and time for that. But on the benefits side, like what you achieve from that is you achieve you're giving people the opportunity to ask questions about the role, ask questions about the job description, or for them to gauge if the culture at the company is going to be safe and supportive for them, or sometimes some of the questions I asked were, or that I was being asked were them having doubts about how their experience might apply, and oftentimes those conversations were just really supportive of me going, okay, no, like you should totally apply. Like we set goals for ourselves as a studio to respond to candidates within 2 weeks, and we just had ahead of time set up a rigorous validation criteria for candidates. So we had a strong idea of what we were looking for, and as it turns out, like in for one of the roles that we hired for, which was a HR admin specialist role, one of the people that had reached out to us initially for that like culture check kind of call, what ended up being the person that was the most prepared person.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I think it's important to remember that recruitment and getting someone to come and work with you and commit their lives to, potentially spending more time with you than some friends and family members is a really vulnerable and important decision. So when people, especially people that are marginalized, when people are going to research a company, to look at a company they're about to apply for, they started yes, I want to apply for this job. But as soon as they start researching, not just the position description, but the role, the people that are there, the people that potentially will be their leaders, their mentors, if they start to find that either it's that isn't going to be safe for them or isn't going to be beneficial to them, they will self-select. We hear lots of statistics around women often needing to feel like they need to hit 100% of the criteria before applying. Like there's that barrier, but then there's how your website perceives, shows to the company what information you have out there about your company, what stories you have in the news about your company. These are all things that will potentially stop someone from even applying to your
True.
workplace. Yeah.
Now I'm
100%.
curious, actually. Yeah. Go ahead. I was actually just curious about like King, because King is actually a massive organization. So how do you manage the communication?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I think it's a very different ball game in the sense of everyone, not necessarily everyone knows of King as a brand, because people know Candy Crush at first, like that's for sure. But probably whoever is trying to get into the games industry or is already in the games industry know of King as a name. So it's easier for us to get people to get to our website, like see our stuff. And we do post, things that we do with our networks and all of the diverse, the diversity and inclusion work that we do. But at the same time, we do want to hit, or we try to hit, mostly people that are starting their careers, because we figured that that's where the biggest pool of possible candidates is going to be, or at least that's what we're trying to reinforce. Not that there aren't women, or any other marginalized groups that are midway to their careers or in the end of their careers, maybe possibly, but we want to make sure that we foster that start of their career as well. Like I got into games after, like my career wasn't something else. I kind of got it in as a accident. So I never knew that was a possibility of, like, it never crossed my mind that in games obviously I could do other jobs besides actually working in the game. So there are so many possibilities, and actually that's part of our job, to show people that's something. And not only that, but how can that work, and how do we receive these people, how is our interview process, to make sure that it's inclusive enough that people feel like, oh, I'm not intimidated or something like that, because you're always going to feel kind of intimidated in an interview process. You're going to feel nervous, but at the same time, making sure that the person feels as comfortable as possible is ideal, right? So my personal experience getting into King was really, for me, it was the first time that I saw a diverse panel interviewing me. I had women, I had people of color, I had like all sorts of different people. Sure, it was a long process, and that is something that actually is important when you are considering especially a diverse candidate, because more often than not, they will be searching for several opportunities, as everyone is. Like, you're sending a bunch of CVs and you're going through several processes at the same time, especially if you need that job. And if you have like a really long, laborious process, people might get offers before you even end your process. So there's that. But what we do essentially is go to diverse events. So events that champion women, diverse events that champion Black people. We did Black Tech Fest this month, for instance. Go to different events and places, have partnerships with schools, to make sure that we are hitting a lot of different places and spots and possibilities, to make sure that people know us, know what we do, know how we are as a company, and just like spread the word, basically. I guess what Javiera was saying, but in a wider.
And Anna, I'm sure as well, when you're at those events too, you're also asking questions and answering questions too, right? Like, you're also figuring
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're 100%. We're not that we're interviewing the candidates at that point, but we are just trying to see what people are like. What are they looking for? Because we're also like learning at those events. Obviously,
Yes.
DNI is something that you're always learning about, right? Like you never know everything. So we also want to know, like, what are other people doing? Like, what are candidates looking for? Like, what can we do better, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely always asking questions and answering questions for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I'll
And-
briefly summarize because we are basically a bit short in time. So in order to cover different topics, so I'll just summarize what I've heard this like so far. So it's not enough to just post the ads to LinkedIn or your companies or private LinkedIn and the company website. It's important to also consider different channels. How do you actually reach the different types of experts you are recruiting? It's good to have a diverse panel in the interviewing, but also a contact point, as many don't really know anyone from the studio. So it's really hard to know, like, what's the culture, do I fit in, or who would I even ask? So way to get in touch with the company. At least those are some things to start with when starting to build the first impression, and also trying to reach a wider audience with the job ads. But so do you? So DEI certainly is a shared challenge. It's a management challenge. It's a HR challenge. It's also a challenge for people working in the company. Like, how do we communicate what our company stands for? But if we talk about the recruitment, in case of recruitment, what are the necessary steps that needs to be taken to make a company inclusive?
For recruitment? Is this with the recruitment lens?
For recruitment, yeah.
Yeah, I think we started touching on it. Obviously, having diverse folks in the recruitment panel and everything like that. But I think it also starts with the hiring managers at the top, and an understanding of the difference between wanting to hire someone tomorrow. Recruitment's always going to be an issue, but I think it's one of those things to make sure that D&I is intrinsically as part of your recruitment process. That it isn't just an afterthought. That it's from day one, that you all have an agreement that these things take time, and that it isn't going to be solved overnight, and that you have to have a beginning to end mentality in regards to it, especially if you do have founders or hiring managers that aren't diverse, because it's difficult for them to understand it fully because they don't live the experience. So they're going to have to be reminded about it. So having processes in place will help keep people in check and keep in processes in place. So I think starting from the very beginning is just that overall structure of how long these things take to do it, quote unquote, right. It's easy enough to say we're gonna go out and try and hire and have a diverse 50% gender diversity studio, but
Whatever.
that's a super difficult that's a massive challenge. And you have to start from the beginning and just say, well, okay, what's the first thing that we can do, and starting with those small steps, and know that it won't be changed overnight by one tool. It's going to be multiple different things that need to come into place.
Yep.
And I also
I completely agree. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
No, I want to hear
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I completely agree. Processes are super important because even if you do have a diverse team, sure, it's never going to be 100% diverse, but like, even if you do have somewhat a diverse team hiring in the panels, in the game teams, or whatever people are going to be working on, people also have unconscious biases. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you don't have, like, that you have, it's not that it doesn't matter, but people will still have their biases. And having processes in place so people can remember to check their biases, remember to have like all of those things in place, and to make sure that we are reaching those goals, whatever they may be. It's super important. 100%. I agree, because otherwise things won't change. Behavior doesn't change if you don't make sure that it becomes a habit. So until that time, processes are super important.
And Something that came to mind was that um, in the in the actual hiring process, a lot of companies will default to certain types of statements as like as a hope of attracting qualified candidates. Something like must have shipped a game or must have shipped a AAA game, and even if like someone may be like of any overlapping identities, and then they finally get their first game job, and they work on a project for 3 years, and then the project gets canceled, or the company goes under. There's like any number of reasons for why a game doesn't ship that has nothing to do with that person's ability to execute on their responsibilities. So, a studio being really accountable to deconstructing um,
Mm,
those harmful and restrictive structures that
mm,
only favor people who have already been given advantages um, going forward. And I think it's also really helpful to have your studio have discussions that define why these problems came up to begin with. It's not that people didn't want to hire women, it's that culture that was directly hostile to women was allowed to persist. And so and so when you look at it that way, and you have a hiring panel that is maybe they are all men of a certain group, like maybe they may be all like white Scandinavian men, and then they're interviewing a panel, and maybe there is a black man or a Latinx woman. The way that we communicate in interviews is going to be different on based on someone's cultural and socioeconomic status. Not only that, but also the amount of opportunities that that person has with them at all. So a company stepping into an interview that has already done the pre-preparation for the candidate, letting them know who they're interviewing, why they're interviewing, what they're interviewing for, and having clear communication, that's going to empower the candidate to actually show up and clearly communicate what they have to offer and what their experiences are and how that relates to the role. That's so important. And so that you can avoid having hiring panels that will favor one candidate over another because they're like, oh, this person was really warm and friendly, and this other person was a little stiff. Like,
hmm,
job interviews should not be like basing that around charisma. The ways in which this world has like supported and just extended different layers of safety to
mm,
like men who are white is so different than to a woman, and even the types of salaries that they're being offered. And so like it can be very often where you might interview someone, and because of their historical experience with access to resources and access to companies that have been interested in them as a candidate, they may show up more confident, more ready, or they may even have another interview down the line as well. So
mm,
really deconstructing those, having clear definitions for your studio about what are the specific skills that are going to prepare a candidate for success in that role, and then allowing that to be the criteria and holding yourself accountable to that, and moving away from these character cultural judgments that can be really insidious.
But
I really liked what you said about the removing the shipped games thing, because I think it's actually really important for companies to really assess what's on their job descriptions and figuring out what they're actually looking for. Is shipping games, that's a skill set. There's something within that skill
It's like
set.
a byproduct. Like
Yeah.
the game is a consequence of a bunch of number of factors that have nothing to do with that person's skill.
Exactly right.
I
Yeah,
have
definitely.
like this monoculture approach to the topic. So, well, I have long experience in the game industry, and I think that unfortunately, too often people just don't think because they don't
Mm,
have any capabilities of understanding. They don't have knowledge of DEI, or they don't consider it relevant, as they just haven't, like, it hasn't surfaced in their lives. And I think that is an unfortunate case for actually many studios that have started as a group of friends, and they are quite the same age and maybe gender and maybe cultural background or educational background or and so forth. So what are your advice to, where to start if, we have no one who knows like basically anything. We want to be like, more approachable as a company, but, where do we start?
The first thing that comes to mind is just making yourself available. Like if your company is hiring, that should be loud and clear on your Twitter accounts. It should be there should be an invitation to ask questions publicly through the Twitter thread. If you are hiring for a position, like allowing people to ask questions. Something that we did at Threshold Games was, as part of our application process, candidates also had a field in their application to leave questions for us. And that helped us be a better studio. It helped us better define our job descriptions, where the first batch of questions that came in for a role were actually things that we should have answered in the job description to begin with. So being available, being public, and not just allowing that job description to float inside the social circles of the staff at your studio, where a company might have a website and maybe they've published 1 or 2 games, but it's still a website. And so you're still depending on candidates to like find that website and somehow have the luck to be looking at the career page at the exact time, or you're depending on people to already be friends with someone who works at the studio. And so instead, just showing up at places where people are actually already gathering.
I think and to that, so in my experience at my last place of work is League of Geeks, which is an independent studio in Melbourne, Australia, and I was the 8th employee, and it was the same thing. It was a group of friends that had started the studio. So four men had started a studio together, and I was the first woman, a woman of color as well, to be hired. And the thing I loved about when I started there is that they were very open and transparent about that. They acknowledged it, they spoke about it, and they were authentic about it. It wasn't, they were like, hey, full transparency, say that you're the first person like you working here. You can be part of this or you can not, it's up to you. But they gave me the option to help work with them and educate them on my experiences in what took me to get there to start working with them. And 7 years later, I didn't shut up about it and was, was really part of that really great relationship, because I could see that they knew that they had a blind side and that they were acknowledging it and willing to work with me on that. So I think a really first step is just acknowledging that we're not here to say that people are doing a bad job. Well, maybe some companies are doing a bad job, but I don't think any of those folks are here. But
not here to judge.
But it's not about it. We're not doing it because you have to do that. There's quotas to be made. It's about being able to build a team to build great products that tell stories from all over, like from diverse backgrounds. So thinking about and reflecting on it in yourself, and knowing that you're going to have to probably do a lot more work in on yourself before you even start inviting people in to the space.
Yeah. And I think to your point about, basically hiring people that look like you, that speak like you, that tend to have the same kind of ideas. My wife has always worked in the games industry. She is a natural producer, born producer. And something that she always said, and I want to quote her on this because she was the one teaching me this, or coming up with this phrase, I guess, at least. She always said, when I hire someone to work on my team, I'm not looking for culture fit, I'm looking for culture add. And I think that's like brilliant, because whenever you're trying to get someone to fit in with your team, that's important. Sure, you want people to go along nicely. You don't want anyone fighting, but the important thing is that people are going to bring different ideas from what you already have in your group. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere with the things that you're trying to do. You're going to get to that same end product that you already have, and what are you going to do with that? Otherwise, there's no innovation. There's no different things that we're doing. So I think that's also part of what you were saying, Lisi, of just making sure that you were open about the things that are different between people, what you're lacking. Sometimes we don't even know that we're lacking something because we don't know what's out there. So whenever you meet someone new and you're hiring someone new in an interview, you're just like, oh, you had an interesting idea about this and that. Like, can you expand on that? Because it's different from yours, and see how that those two things could coexist or work together and stuff like that. But definitely, I don't want to not say that it's her idea. It's not mine, but I definitely use that all the time.
But I think that's perfect. Yeah, not to find a culture fit, but find a culture add, as that also evolves the and basically enriches the development, as there are basically different thoughts, and also hopefully possibility to have a dialogue and different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, being available is important. Be available also to get questions. So you don't necessarily have, you don't necessarily have all the understanding, but by listening, you already learn quite a bit. And then companies considering, like, is shipping a game really at the highest criteria in the recruitment? Which, I also agree. There are so many things that you can just learn by doing, and quite quickly. So it's not impossible, even if you wouldn't have that experience. Acknowledge your blind side, or acknowledge your limitations, and reflect yourself, and also be ready to learn. So I think tons of great thoughts here. Okay, so what about then? Okay, let's imagine that the recruitment process went through. After recruitment, how do we go from there? DE strategy obviously is a evolving process. So how to keep it up when company grows, or there are certain changes happening over time. Do you have any real world examples how your companies tackle with keeping the DEI strategy as part of the company culture?
I think there are 2 points that I want to hit. One is that you always need to keep reviewing your strategy, because things change, people give you feedback, and you should listen to the feedback. Keep asking for feedback as well from all the employees, people that you're hiring, because it doesn't matter that, say, you have we're going to hit 50-50 women and men in the company. This is our goal. And you are able to hire 50% of women, but they're all like in entry level jobs, or they are not able to grow or whatever. So you do have to keep asking for feedback, checking in, making sure people are, how they're doing. And if there's anything that we could be doing differently, asking for feedback is super important. Because even though you might have D&I on your title, it doesn't mean that you know everything, or that you're supposed to know everything. And people have to be aware of that too, because everyone is in a journey of learning. And the other thing I want to hit is that as a company, I guess you should be ready to teach people, because it doesn't, as we know, not necessarily everyone has the same level of opportunity. And as we're saying, like, you shouldn't have the ship a game on your CV to make sure that you get into a company, because especially if you're a company specialized in something specific, like a games company, you're supposed to have games out there, or hopefully one day you're going to have games out there, but you're trying to hone in on a particular thing. And so probably you have people already in your company that have the technical skills. And so you can always teach someone. You can always, hire someone with a lower level of experience, and make sure that you're doing that work to teach them, to hone their skills, especially if they're diverse, and if you are actually, what's the word for this? If you really want to do this, and if you really want to go into, let's be a diverse company, be in the D&I space with purpose, you do have to be open to teaching people things. That's how we're going to have a diverse workforce, because as we said already, like, it's not necessarily that, most often than not, diverse people and marginalized people are not going to have the same kind of opportunities, or know that those things are even a possibility, especially depending on where they come from or what their background. So yeah, I think you just have to be open to learn and teach at the same time.
Yeah.
And having that be a core part the onboarding process as well is important. I think that like if your company, like let's say you're 8 people and you've done the work to reach consensus on the values that matter and on the actual policies that will uphold those values, but then when you bring someone new in, there is still the onboarding, not only of just here's the state of the project and here's what you need to know about your role to start being a meaningful contributor, but also like here is how we communicate, here's how we deliver feedback, like actually defining the culture and then having that live somewhere in your company's wiki or documentation, just so that you're all working off of the same definitions and not just making assumptions.
Definitely. And I think on top of all of this as well is just being prepared to being uncomfortable and being prepared to have challenging conversations. Even myself during my journey and during leadership experiences, having situations where I've had to deal with staff difficulties because of the diversity come up, and not knowing how to handle it because it's the first time I've come across this type of conflict in the workplace, because it isn't just your normal, someone doesn't like someone else. It's like some deep internally, and figuring out how yourself and your leadership team is going to react to that and support it. I think also creating spaces within the organization. So thinking about if you are onboarding people from diverse backgrounds within your organization, making sure that those people know that they can connect with each other and that they can talk to each other and create their own little subcommittees and groups within the organization to support one another. I know a lot of big organizations, and I'm sure King has it, like diversity teams and everything, where they can have discussions in a safe space about a particular topic while at work and continue to feel empowered about the fact and potentially still underrepresented within the organization, but they know that they have their squad. It's important to be like, you're walking through the hallways of the office and you've got someone there that has your back, and it might not be your lead. It might be someone working on another team. And I think it's really important to highlight that as well within your organization as you grow and as that journey does happen, because I didn't think it would make a difference. I was like one of those, when I started my journey, I was one of those, guys, girls. I liked being the only woman in the group. Like, I will admit to that. But then when you start surround yourself with others, you realize that insecurity starts to fall away, and that you can actually start become an authentic person and a better leader as well while being part of that. So that's what I would say as well.
Yeah, I think it's thanks so much for the discussions, because I think it's to the point that this is about learning and evolving. Like, none of us know all the answers, and let's cherish that.
Well, I wanted to add one thing to what Lisi had said about like surrounding yourself with others, that a company can actually be proactive in that regard, where if you hire a graphics programmer, like, your company can have a directory of communities that are like discipline specific, so that if you hire a graphics programmer, you're like, oh, also, like, if here are some other communities for graphics programmers, if you want some career support, and being proactive in doing that. It's something that we have a directory of support communities at our company, and like, there's not just like one trans person at my studio, there's multiple, and we have multiple community references for, like, this is a community that is here to support people of queer identities, and so just like a company being proactive to think about, like, what is a social ecosystem that can really hold and support this person beyond the responsibilities of a company, and even just having that bare minimum work of having like a general list of, like, here's some communities. It goes a long way, and then people can have support for their profession. They can also have support for like challenges in their role that come up, and I think that's important, and it doesn't need to all rest on one person.
Yeah, unfortunately, now we are running out of time. So I guess, Oleg, we will be answering the audience questions after the panel.
Yes, Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
think there's a lot of questions, and yeah, if you can stay a little bit here on the backstage and answer those questions, that would be fantastic.
Thanks so much for the discussion.
Yes, I want to thank you very much, Javiera, Lisi, Anna, and Sonia, for being part with us. It's an important topic. We try to raise it at all these events, and yeah, we already have like a series covered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.